Hello everybody. I'm Theodore Christakis. I hold the chair on legal and regulatory implications of artificial intelligence at the University of Grenoble. And I'm very happy to welcome you to this panel, which is about a very interesting and new topic, the concept of sovereign AI and the interactions, especially between AI, generative AI, the upcoming AI agents, and issues such as national sovereignty, national security, but also law enforcement. This topic, I think it's the first time that there is a panel about sovereign AI. But this topic, I'm convinced that it will remain very much at the center of debates for the years to come. And it has a lot of dimensions, different dimensions, which are coming one on top of the other. But basically, the idea is that our world is about to change, that AI, generative AI, and AI agents will play an increasingly important role for economic development, but also in our society more generally. And this has huge consequences in terms of issues such as strategic autonomy, European strategic autonomy and digital sovereignty, issues such as national security, the risk of abuse of generative AI or AI agents by malicious actors, and the issue also of government access to data. So today we will launch some ideas. We don't intend to bring definitive solutions to these problems. And I'm very glad to have three fantastic panelists, because Becky Richards, who is at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence at the NSA, unfortunately was not able to make it for CPDP, but we have here Kai Zenner and Jan Padova, and we have online Ben Nemo. Hi, Ben. Nice to see you. And thanks for joining us, who's not able to come, but we will present his work with OpenAI on some of these issues in a little while. I would like to, just before giving the floor to my panelists for their different aspects of these questions, I would like just to say that the debate about this new concept of sovereign AI comes a little bit on the aftermath of a debate which was launched a few years ago about European digital sovereignty. And I think that the first time that this was launched was in 2018 when Jean-Claude Juncker, who was then, as you know, the president of the European Commission, launched this concept. And almost everybody criticized him for talking about digital sovereignty. But as Bob Dylan says, the times they are changing, and today you cannot go to a single panel without hearing the word digital sovereignty, European digital sovereignty, and precisely this is a new term, AI sovereignty, which is a little bit the translation of European digital sovereignty, but in the field of evolutions concerning AI. And we will try to inquire today, what does this mean? What are the different aspects of this concept? What are the different concerns of European actors, including in the Parliament and in the European Parliament? And as a matter of fact, I would like to start because I come from an international background, and I wrote a study that you can find on Seren on European digital sovereignty back in 2019. And precisely I was trying to understand if these terms from a purely normative point of view makes any sense. And my conclusion very clearly was that it makes no sense from a normative point of view. It can only, as I wrote at the time, the concept of digital sovereignty, further accentuate the classic confusion surrounding the use of the term sovereignty, which is one of the most equivocal concepts in legal theory, and which has been criticized by Louis Henkin, a famous US colleague, for often being nothing else than, I quote, a catchword, a substitute for thinking and precision. I like very much this. But still, from a political point of view, European digital sovereignty is an extremely powerful concept, and it's broad and ambiguous enough in order to encompass very different things and to become a kind of projection surface for a wide variety of political demands. And we'll try to see what these terms can mean in the field of AI. In this study, I was trying to analyze precisely the concept. This was before AI, before ChatGPT. I wrote the study, by the way, 100% myself. I didn't use ChatGPT in 2019. As a matter of fact, I was analyzing the two aspects of the concept as I could find it in all the official EU documents. The one, sovereignty as regulatory power, the power of Europe to regulate in the digital sphere. And you know, oh my God, how many things happened in the last years. And the other half was about strategic autonomy. And I think this will be extremely important in our discussions today, the ability to act in the digital sphere without being restricted to an undesired extent by external dependencies. And I think that, for instance, the Eurostack initiative that will be discussed here very much concern this aspect. I would like to say that this concept of whatever it means, digital sovereignty, is not only something that exists in Europe. We see in other countries, we see in the United States, a lot of developments, including regulatory restrictions in order, let's say, to protect AI and US dominance on AI. And some of the things, for instance, that have happened recently was an executive order adopted last year by President Biden limiting bulk sales of personal data to countries of concern. And very clearly there, we see that in the reasoning of this executive order, we can see the motive was countries of concern can rely on advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence, to analyze and manipulate bulk-sensitive data to engage in espionage, influence, kinetic or cyber operations, or to identify other potential strategic advantages over the United States. Another thing is that there are a lot of proposals, including a proposal by the Commerce Department to introduce new rules, including obligations for cloud providers. You know that you cannot have generative AI or AI agents without having big cloud infrastructures behind and data centers. And there are a lot of proposals to introduce know your customer requirements for big cloud providers. And there was such a proposal from the Commerce Department. It was entitled Infrastructure as a Service Provider's Responsibility to Verify the Identity of Their Customers, Special Measures, and the Use of Their Products for Large AI Model Training. And the idea was precisely to introduce Know Your Customer requirements for big US cloud services in order to monitor, especially, and to report to the government any kind of training of a large AI model with potential capabilities that could be used in malicious, cyber-enabled activity. And you know also that there was, at another dimension, this diffusion rule, which was introduced by Biden, but finally not adopted last week by the Trump administration, but we will see what will replace it in order to limit also the sale of some high advanced microchips used for generative AI, including, for instance, for some European countries, and this created a lot of reactions because, for instance, countries like Poland or other European countries, while the sales could go unrestricted for France, for instance, or Germany. For other countries, there would be restrictions and quotas, because there is a fear, especially that this could afterwards be used in order to circumvent other US restrictions concerning China or other countries. So these are some, you see that we have these discussions everywhere about how to be able, after all, in the different geopolitical systems, to develop AI and to be present in this AI race. And of course, there are a lot of other dimensions, including the fact that everybody is using today ChatGPT, Gemini, and the other systems. And you can use it for, malicious actors can use it also. This can be either criminals, or this can be proxies of different governments that can use this for influence operations, for instance. And Ben Nemo will talk to us about his work, which is precisely this, to detect and combat any kind of abuse of ChatGPT for this kind of operations. And this concerns directly both national security. Of course, we will have large-scale influence operations, but also it could be of huge interest for law enforcement people. And I think that one of the huge topics in the future, and we organized a panel also last week in Venice in the Privacy Symposium, will be the issue of law enforcement agents and national security agents' access to generative AI data. Because today, almost all of you are using these generative AI systems, and more and more people use them for very personal issues. You know that there is a huge interest of the law enforcement authorities or national security agencies when, for instance, somebody goes to Google and makes a request how to bury a body or how to build a bomb. You can imagine that when you use Google search on steroids and you discuss with GPT, and you give all the details about the body, where is everything, the height, how much, etc., in order to get an accurate answer. This could be of even more interest for law enforcement people, and same for national security. And we have seen, for instance, that OpenAI has opened a transparency page several months ago because they receive a lot of requests. And of course, law enforcement people are very much interested on metadata, of course, first of all, but content data could be of huge interest for them also. And I think that as it happened with Google search at the beginning, you know, the requests were limited, and then you see the curve going like this from national security and law enforcement agencies. And I think that something similar will happen with generative AI data, and especially the inputs by users. So we have all these different dimensions. And once again, we will try today with my panelists to try to launch some ideas and to launch the debate, but in reality, all the things that we'll discuss could be separate panels about different issues. And without wasting, I was trying a little bit to set part of the scene of what we intend to discuss in this panel. And I would like, first of all, to give the floor to Kai, who is, as you all know, who is head of the office of probably the member of the European Parliament, which is for years now the most active in issues in digital issues, Axel Voss, and who is also a digital advisor, and who, beyond this work done with Axel Voss, is also at one of the architects of the Eurostack initiative, which was another term. He read my study and my doubts about the term digital sovereignty, so they named this Eurostack. and he will talk to us about this important initiative, which it has a lot of dimensions, as you will say, but one of the main concerns, I guess, is precisely to position Europe as an actor and to limit dependencies, especially in the current geopolitical context, where we have some tensions with our traditional ally, the United States. There have been some people who are talking about, who fear the issue is not anymore just government access to data and all well-known issues, but also the fear of a kill switch that if things go very, very wrong, could there be a kind of kill switch which will paralyze European actors who wish to use artificial intelligence? Probably these fears are overblown. But the truth is that it is only normal for Europeans to think and to discuss about these issues and to think about potential outcomes. So I would like to give first the floor to Kai to present us a little bit what are the thoughts in Brussels about all these issues. Okay.
Yes, perfect. Many, many thanks for the invitation and for this possibility. My boss, Axel Voss, was unfortunately not able to come, but indeed I was quite active on the Eurostack front, and you made such a nice intro, especially explaining a little bit the history of tech sovereignty, digital sovereignty, that I really want to use to also complement it a little bit more from an EU institutional perspective, and really explaining you a little bit from my background, from Axel's background or activities, because this topic to us indeed is not new. I joined the parliament in 2017, Axel in 2009, and we, at least since I'm there, we are basically really fully on this topic of, okay, how do we make sure that the digitalization of European industry, of European society is finally accelerating? How do we make sure that we are becoming more resilient and so on? And indeed, our good friend Martin Selmayr back then was one of the first under Juncker, or with Juncker, it was never so clear, who was pushing for this point and making a kind of first initiative. And then, as you all know, it was mainly Commissioner Breton that was really the force together with the French government behind it. And again, indeed, he was not very successful. There was a lot of backlash, because as a German, I think I'm allowed to say it was a rather French concept. It was maybe fitting there, but for a German economy, there were a lot of terms that our CEOs do not like. They are kind of allergic against it, and therefore I found it already interesting that Breton version 2, so after midterm, was dropping a lot of words, terms that he was using in 20, and it became much more about resilience. And as I said, for us that are really in this kind of movement from the beginning, there was really similar to an AI winter. There was also a sovereignty winter in the end of the term, where we were sad that there was so much work, like, for example, the AIDA special committee in the parliament that spent over 1 year of discussions and research and made a really long roadmap that was then, like so often, fully ignored. And then jump to Trump election, basically, we saw that finally there seems now really geopolitical momentum. Plus, there was a Draghi report that was basically also making a lot of points that we were making. And this was a little bit why there was maybe this third moment of discussion on digital sovereignty, tech sovereignty. And you know many of the points that I want to make. Actually, I want to make 8 points. I don't know if I manage the time, but I try. But I just want to underline again, even in 2018, it was already, let's say, the starting point that people in the European Commission, in the European institution, but also academia, was realizing that compared to previous decades, Europe was really losing more and more this role as a digital leader, or technology leader is maybe the better word. Some of us use this term historically a little bit difficult, digital colony. But which shows that, there are more and more dependencies, that especially our digital infrastructure is in the hands of foreign actors, not always friendly foreign actors. And despite our, in theory at least, market strengths and the existing digital talents that we have at our universities, we are losing a little bit when it comes to digital competitiveness worldwide, especially with China, with the US running away. You see it in the statistics from Draghi, and long before, as I said, it's really a lot of research being done. And Eurostack and also European Way, to make a little bit of advertisements, this is a personal publication with 35 co-authors, from Zach Meyer, very industry-friendly, very pro-market, international, to Christina Cafara, who is probably the opposite. But we managed to bring them all together and write down with the European Way a vision that is going beyond Eurostack, but really addressing those key problems that I was talking about, lagging behind in terms of digital transition, becoming more and more dependent, and kind of clueless how to react to those geopolitical challenges. The big question, why do we need a Eurostack and why do we need a European Way? I mentioned already a little bit, we are depending on US and Chinese tech, as you know, for chips, for compute, for cloud, connectivity, data, all of them, of course, especially in the times of AI, really important. And similar to Draghi, in our publication European View, we underlined again that one of the biggest problems in our view is really this incoherent policy in the digital field from the European level that was trying to address a lot of real problems, let's say, with a single view on all those individual activities. They often made a lot of sense, but they were just not streamlined. You saw the problems, for example, in Digital Europe position papers about contradicting, overlapping definitions, mechanism, enforcement is a huge problem, and so on. And the Commission always used another buzzword on top of sovereignty, the European way, a third way to do digital, to become, again, competitive, but no one has a clue what it is until today. There's a digital decade, there's a digital declaration on fundamental, on digital rights and freedoms or whatever. There's a digital data strategy, the AI strategy. All of them have some fragments, some pieces, but they were never really brought together. And this we see on top of those dependencies that are there as really the core issues that hold us back, and also didn't really help our industry to create products that are really unique, that are, for example, more trustworthy, more sustainable, and so on. Because if there is no clear overall vision, it's very, very difficult for companies to have a kind of concrete and conceptually sound product, especially if they need to fulfill contradicting obligation. And in general, we would say this regulatory first strategy that we saw over the last 2 or 1.5 decades in the European Union has really failed. We do see certain advantages or benefits. There is definitely a limited Brussels effect for certain laws. DMA maybe we see now more and more getting more and more traction. But in the end, it was not really this big step. So what the European View, first of all, introduced, going back to this lack of overall vision, was really that we scanned a lot of documents from academia, from the Commission, from the Parliament, and so on, because everything is actually there. What is not being done, as I said, to bring everything together. This we tried to do, and we came to 6 principles that Europe really stands for. Principled governance, so that we are actually defending, or in principle, should defend our values, our freedoms, and so on, that we are trying to build up interoperable systems, platforms, and so on, where different actors of all sizes can cooperate with each other. For the consumer, you see it a little bit in the Data Act. It's possible to shift also from one provider to the other. Also, this big point of resilience, as that Breton was, I would say, mainly pushing in, is a huge point that we are actually thinking about how to make everything safer, especially in difficult times like today. Sustainability, trustworthiness, I mentioned them already, should be some of the core principles that are really making European products different. Maybe they are lacking in terms of speed, of size, or whatsoever towards Chinese or US American products. But if we would go to more to niches, and this brings me to the last point, our decentralized SME-based economy, we could really complement US big tech, Chinese big tech in a kind of friendly way, not in a hostile way, but because with their off-the-shelf products, they are really addressing a much broader audience. And for many people, it's the perfect product. We don't want to change that, but we think that the European economy can really complement such, let's call it general purpose technologies. And the Eurostack, as I said, was a little bit more narrow compared to our European view. It was really looking in the technology stack, especially for our political group. We always looked indeed to India, to Brazil, to a few other countries that were using either a digital public infrastructure or a broader digital infrastructure, and they are, kind of in a modular way connected a lot of different layers from ships, data centers, connectivity, data, software, and so on, had common standards. And what I like very much about the India stack is that it's really creating a rather fair platform where everyone has a chance to contribute, to place a product if certain principles are fulfilled. And there I really want to underline that, at least, as you said already, the Eurostack is really a bottom-up movement, similar to, I don't know, Friday for Future maybe, or something like that, with a lot of very, very different mindsets, very different actors. And therefore, I'm definitely, well, I was one of the, let's say, leading figures from the beginning, at least on technical level. But I definitely do not represent the whole movement. Axel and I, and let's say people who are more on the conservative, industry-friendly camp, we never understood Eurostack or tax sovereignty as something that is calling for protectionism, isolation, and so on. Mm-hmm. We were always going in the direction we should not work with certain countries, with certain companies that are not aligning with our values. Again, think about resilience. But there are definitely a lot of like-minded companies, a lot of like-minded countries that we need. We cannot do everything ourselves. We were never big fans of those, in my opinion, crazy ideas to build a European browser, a European Z, a European Z, a European Z. It doesn't really make sense. Waste of funding, in my opinion, and Axel's opinion. We should really go again in terms of our decentralized economy in areas where we do have a chance, where there is an added value for some European products, where maybe we are also leading. And this brings me maybe to some strategic objectives. Some of them I mentioned already. At least those parts of the Eurostack movement that I work closely with, it's really all about reducing dependencies and get a little bit back control about those core elements of our digital infrastructure. Of course, similar to Draghi's push, again, we see ourselves as kind of follow-up initiative on Draghi and Letter. It's all about empowering European firms to build up and scale up digital products, AI products, to become more competitive. But again, I just always want to underline, not by closing our markets or similar ideas that we feel are not workable. And of course, not really a side effect, but a further effect. It's all about really increasing the level of security, making us safer, while still going for openness, for transparency, for free market approaches, and so on. A little bit repetition what you saw in the Draghi report, but also in our papers. We feel that what I said with regulatory initiatives, many things went in the wrong direction. This I will not repeat, but also if you look, for example, to investment programs, to other initiatives, action plans, and so on. Sometimes they try to duplicate a successful non-European product, burned a lot of money for nothing. Then we see also a lot of investments in low-level investments in a broad variety of projects that were then often not scaled up or commercialized. We see often people working in the Commission as project managers that have backgrounds, I don't know, I'm saying now some example in agriculture, and certainly need to decide on quantum computing projects and so on. So a lot of problems where we really, again, this is our call, should go much more strategic in it, make priorities in certain areas where we have a chance to lead. And because of time, very, very shortly, maybe some actionable points where we definitely want to see some changes. Especially our group is quite divided when it comes to buy European for all public procurement, for example. At least in EPP, there will be not a majority for it, but we do understand that at least in certain areas, a buy European clause, or at least more transparency, that the public sector would need to justify why they are not using, in terms of quality, equal product and decided for a non-European product would make sense, for example, to avoid that our European cloud providers are completely disappearing from the market. And really, last but not least, our call is really, in order to have this more coherent European digital strategy, more strategic strategy that is really using our strengths and making the best of it, finally, especially the European Commission needs to better coordinate with each other. Also, member states need to work better with each other, also internally. We do understand and see that certain reform proposals that we are making in both papers are maybe, even despite the momentum geopolitically, Draghi and so on, are still not really backed by a majority. And this is why we, as my last point, proposed a sovereignty compact, as we said. So really try to reintroduce this concept of a multi-speed Europe, so that at least some member states that are, for example, willing to harmonize their digital education system or their whatsoever, that those countries can step forward, can try it out, and maybe as a kind of best practice or sandboxing initiative are then later on convincing other member states to jump on, similar to the Euro or to Schengen, for example. I could speak much longer, but I think we are desperate in time, so I stop here.
Thanks a lot for this very interesting and balanced presentation. Of course, I invite everybody to go and visit your website, where you have all the documents and studies and that have been done on this concept. Still, I will not ask you this question directly, but you can respond later at the end, because I want to give the floor immediately to Jan. I guess there are some tensions inside the Eurostack initiative. We see, for instance, A very good thing is that you call the European Commission to define what we mean by sovereign cloud, for instance, because everybody's using the term as they like.
Yeah.
But we do see in your document, for instance, these tensions in the part concerning sovereign cloud, where you say, for the successful uptake of cloud, where this was a letter, as a matter of fact, with more than 200 industries.
Yeah.
But it's written, for the successful uptake of cloud, data spaces, and AI, European cloud users must be able to ensure that their most sensitive data are protected against access or operational disruption arising from non-EU extraterritorial laws. And you call to address these issues. We know the huge debate concerning the EUCS, the European Cloud Service Cybersecurity Certification Scheme, and the push by France to introduce sovereignty requirements there. And there are some disagreements, which for the time being have blocked the EUCS. And by the way, you say should be augmented to high plus criteria, so you support the French proposal, but at the same time you say, or EUCS should be kept on hold until an adequate alternative solution is found, which is what happens. It's kept on hold. But anyway, I just wanted to launch this in relation with what you said, and to give the floor immediately to Jan Padova, a former regulator, a very active lawyer who is following all these issues for years and following the developments in Brussels concerning these issues, also advising companies on all these issues. And I would like to ask him for his practitioner's view on all these issues concerning sovereign AI.
Thanks, Theodore, and thanks for inviting me. I mean, I love the place. I mean, it's not like a traditional conference room. It's like more a pub. So I guess we should have a beer all together. We're on the stage. We should sing and play some guitar. But no. Anyway, thanks for that. No, as you said before, and Kai, you said also, the notion of sovereignty is very sensitive to geopolitical landscape, and has been present for 15 years, but with up and downs depending on the geopolitical landscape. So now we are up, clearly because of in particular the change on the other side of the Atlantic. But sovereignty is a multifactorial notion. You have energy sovereignty, you've got agricultural sovereignty, you've got defense sovereignty, you've got financial sovereignty, and now we are talking about AI sovereignty. But it's just one side of a global concept. And, as a good, well-trained lawyer, I'd like to question the question first, What do you mean by sovereignty, or what do we mean by sovereignty? I'm sure if we conduct a survey right now, come up with a different definition almost with everyone. So, I mean, we have to agree on what we are talking about in order to be in line with what we may contemplate as solutions or means, etc. So I came, Theodore, with my own definition today. Did my little homework yesterday. Of course, my definition comes from my own background. I'm, a lawyer trained on public law and constitutional law. So, I mean, this is what influenced me. But I think my definition is not in the book. I mean, it's not ChatGPT either that I wrote it. I think sovereignty is when you have the resources and the means to serve and implement the goals you have freely determined. So you see, you've got three components, in my view, in sovereignty: that resources and the means to implement decision, goals, purposes, whatever priorities you have freely determined. So, and that's my definition, you may disagree, but at least it can, enable me to share with you what it is and what it is not, in my view. What it is that you need means and resources. Resources, it's be financial, it's been human, it's infrastructure, it's energy. The skills is human capital, as the economists say. The fact to have a well-trained educational system is part of the sovereignty, especially in the digital age. If you have a poor educational system, you won't be able to be sovereign at some point. So it's a critical factor. And also you need a legal framework that is favorable or does not hinder or foster innovation, I think. This is where maybe the lawyer and the former regulator comes into play. So this is what it is in my view. But it is not, it's not self-sufficiency. It's not autarky. It's not, and as a French, we are very often accused of that, and I think rightly so, it's not protectionism. And because, French has a kind of cultural bias, and I can speak that easily, they rely more on the states than on the companies, and they rely more on protectionism measures than on, competition and free market. So whenever someone from France speaks about sovereignty, it rings a red alarm in our friends from Germany, and rightly so. So this is not ready. And to make my point, I'd like to take an example from another sector I know well, because in my previous life, in my previous career, I've been commissioner in the energy sector in France. So I did spend many years there. I'd like to take the example of the energy sector in France and the electricity in France. As you know, whether you support that or not, but France has a very strong electrical and electricity capacity thanks to its nuclear plants. I mean, that's it. France is totally independent in electricity. Electricity is very important for AI and for digital, and exports electricity at the cheapest price in the EU. So it's a very strong industrial asset. Whether you like it or not, that's a fact. But what is less known, and this is my point, is when this program of nuclear plants was launched in France under the General de Gaulle government in the early 60s, they had two competing solutions. One was purely French, built by the CEA, Commissariat à l'énergie atomique. I don't know how to translate that. Okay, French design. And the other was the Westinghouse solution, so Westinghouse, US company design. And the General de Gaulle government, Pierre Mesmer, Prime Minister at the time, chose the Westinghouse design. And what is less known is that the entirety of the nuclear plants in France are, US design, and it's a licensing agreement that was led to this kind of situation I described before. And it will not come in your mind, I guess, to say that France is not independent because it has a licenses agreement with a US company. So you see, my point is that I think that AI sovereignty is an industrial challenge. And as an industrial challenge, should be addressed and designed as such. It's not other thing that an industrial design applied to a specific technologies. So it needs a lot of computing capacity, you say that. Okay, cloud computing. Today, all the hyperscalers are US, and maybe Chinese also. And this is the result of 15 years of colossal investment from these companies. This, it's a fact, maybe you regret not, this cannot be overcome today. It's not affordable for the EU to invest such an amount of money very quickly to challenge this trend. So this is the fact. So my take is that as in the energy sector, as in electricity, I think sovereignty will go more through industrial partnership rather than recreating completely what is already existing and that which is very efficient and competing. And I know on the cloud industry that there are some partnerships at the French level, interesting one, with big names, relying on like a company which is really high on involving in the defense industry in France. So in order to add a brick of sovereignty and protection from interference, and two competing offers are building like that with that. And this is more for me about finding the right partnership, the right team, rather than recreating from scratch and reinventing the wheel. So choose your dependency rather than put the same all your money and your eggs in the same basket. So that's the first point I wanted to see how I approach and design and consider AI sovereignty in general. So where do we stand in Europe right now in light of the three criteria I've said: resources, means, and legal framework? Well, you've quoted, Kai, rightly the Draghi report, and the Draghi report, I think, is very useful to have at least a common understanding of strengths and weaknesses. I think EU, in my view, has two issues, two weaknesses. First is capital market fragmentation. Capital market fragmentation. You could display the first slide, guys. You could that. It's very interesting. It comes from the Draghi report. If you can show the slide 1, s'il vous plaît. No, that's not a slide.
Here
no,
it
that's
is.
the second one,
okay.
the other one.
The second, okay.
There's another one before.
Okay.
This is very interesting. Capital market fragmentation, what does that mean operationally? This means that the amount of money available for companies to find in the capital market that can be invested in the company is lower. And this is very interesting because this is venture capital investment at development stages. So if we talk about AI, we talk about startup, new companies, or whatever. When it's a seed or when it's early stages or when it's later stages, whatever you take into account, the amount of capital investment available for European companies is between 80 and 82% lower than in the US. So that's the direct consequence of capital market fragmentation. And why do some startups, including French one, go at some point very quickly to the US market? Not because they don't like Europe. No, they're Europeans. They are usually they like the country. They've been, educated, raised, etc. Sometimes they've been to the US and they will come back to the EU. But if you need quickly to grow and to scale up, you won't find the money in Europe because of that fragmentation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is so that's the other slide. It's also in the Draghi report, is that it's not that we have too much over-regulation, because we hear that. I don't believe it's over-regulated. Every advanced continent has regulation. It's that the way it is designed in Europe is debatable. And this is stated in the report of Draghi. It's the next slide. Draghi said that we have 100 laws already, 270 regulators on digital prior to the implementation of the Act. But more importantly, in my view, is that the legal framework in Europe is risk-averse. And we also hear that the AI Act is a risk-based approach. But risk-based approach highlights the risk first rather than the opportunity. So the way it is designed is a very, I would say, not politically, do not misunderstand me, but it's a very conservative approach, and that it's a very precautionary approach. It's what we call the principe de précaution, principle of precaution, applied to innovation and AI in particular, and this will not work. This cannot work. And interestingly, it's just words, but what I like is in the UK, the new government released in February its action plan on AI because they want to catch up. And you know how they called it? They called it Opportunity Action Plan. Opportunity. I think it's core, and the way you design regulation will impact and influence its implementation. Suppose, I'd like to have this experience one day here at the CPDP, maybe that's an idea. We take the same group of people, we say, okay, you collectively draft a proposal for regulation on the opportunities of AI. We do that the morning, and then the afternoon we take the same group of people and say, okay, you draft a regulation on risk of AI. You will end up in two different places, though it will be the same people that will be drafting. So, that's be a concluding remark in my view. It's a political choice, but it's like really political design thinking. And this is where I think we are not really ready to catch up, because we have this approach, and it's not because we have a regulation, it's because we have a specific design in the regulation.
Thank you so much for these very interesting thoughts. Although it's funny to hear lawyers protesting about overregulation, it's like if you bite the hand that feeds you. But anyway,
sometimes I can be honest, you see.
So I would like now to turn, without wasting time, because the discussion is extremely interesting and there are so many things to discuss, but time goes by very quickly, and I would like to leave some time also for the debate. Now for something different, but which is extremely linked to the issues concerning protection of states, protection of national sovereignty, protection of our democracies also, and it's the issue of and the fear of abuse of generative AI, or tomorrow AI agents, by hostile actors, either criminals, private criminals, or malicious actors linked to states. And I would like to give the floor to, if you can put Ben Nemo, please, who is a principal investigator with OpenAI. It's precisely his work is to detect and to prevent this kind of use. Should I do something for the slides? Okay. Okay. What,
I can comment that one if you
while you reconnect, it's a pity that Ben cannot hear, but I wanted to ask this as a follow-up question, but while you try to reconnect, I will present this to you. He knows that I will ask the question. There was a study which was published yesterday, and there was an article in The Guardian. The title is AI Can Be More Persuasive Than Humans in Debates, Scientists Find. So it was a big study which compare persuasion operations by humans or by chatbots. And they found that artificial intelligence can do better than humans when it comes to persuading others in a debate for a series of reasons, including probably that chatbots do not shout during the discussion, the family dinner. But as a matter of fact, what is interesting, Ben, we are happy to reconnect with you. And while we're trying to reconnect, I'm presenting this new study and the article in The Guardian that I shared with you, so you can eventually introduce it also, because we have had already a very interesting exchange of emails about this. I quote the authors who say in The Guardian, if persuasive AI can be deployed at scale, you can imagine armies of bots micro-targeting undecided voters, subtly nudging them with tailored political narratives that feel authentic. I would be surprised, says the lead author, if malicious actors hadn't already started to use these tools to their advantage to spread misinformation and unfair propaganda. I sent this to Ben before our panel because precisely this is his job with OpenAI, and he will talk to us about what he's doing with specific examples. But I was also a little bit surprised by this very, very negative presentation and doom AI and how we can. But because I could not understand operationally how it works, how exactly malicious actors, even AI is more persuasive. After all, this can be a big advantage, as the actors say, in order to help people go away from conspiracy theories or to convince them about good things. But I could not understand exactly how this could work, how exactly they could instrumentalize, for instance, I don't know, ChatGPT in order to do these kind of things. And probably I would kindly ask Ben, while presenting his work, to give us a little bit his thoughts about is it as easy as possible? What kind of tools could they need in order for these malicious actors to abuse chatbots in such a way? So Ben, you have the floor, please. We cannot hear you.
I've only been working remote for 10 years. I have learned to unmute finally. Thank you for that, Theodore, and sorry for dropping. I think the internet decided to rebel against us. But my job is I'm principal investigator on the intelligence and investigations team at OpenAI. Far too many years ago, I had the privilege of being a journalist in the Berlaymont press room, so I wish I could join you in Brussels, and I'm sorry that I can't. Part of my job involves investigating, detecting, disrupting covert influence operations. And we think of those as deceptive attempts to manipulate public opinion or influence political outcomes without revealing the identity or the motivations of the people who are behind them. If you think about the Guardian report, we all know that back in 2022, ChatGPT launched. And that led to a wave of concern at the time that threat actors, covert influence operations might use AI in some way to get better at what they're doing. There was lots of fear about them flooding the zone and swamping out conversation and being persuasive. On a read of the Guardian article, that concern is expressed there as well. That is a concern that I share. My whole job, or part of my job, is detecting and disrupting attempts to do that. But something that I noticed and that we in the kind of Defender for community noticed in the year or so after the deployment of ChatGPT was there was a lot of speculation, there was a lot of hypothesizing around what might happen, but there were almost no case studies of what was actually happening. There was no kind of reality to ground the debate. And so February last year, OpenAI started publishing threat reports, initially on cyber actors, and then, as of May last year, on covert influence operations. And what we've been trying to do is by releasing these more or less regular reports. We're trying to fill in some of the blanks, put some meat on the bones and say, here's what's actually happening, here's what we're observing. And it's really an attempt to take the pulse of what's actually going on right now. You may wonder, what's a human investigator doing at an AI company? Like, surely you've all been replaced by avatars by now. When we think about this kind of challenge, violations, effectively abuses of AI, violative behaviors, we try and think about defense in depth. If you Google the phrase, as an AI language model, these days you'll find a whole load of memes. But back in the day, if you'd used that as an open source search term, you would have found a whole load of fake accounts on different social media platforms that had clearly been automated to get something from an AI language model and then post it online. And none of them had actually done any proofreading. And in fact, one of my favorite covert influence operations of recent years was a Russian operation last year that published on Telegram a post which said, as an AI language model, I can't pretend to be somebody else because authenticity is important. That shows you that threat actors don't always proofread their own stuff. But it also shows you that one of the layers of defense is the model refusal. The model will say, I can't do that. But we know that humans, threat actors, are persistent. They will try and find ways around the guardrails. And so we've built a whole suite of AI-powered tools that will look for attempted abuses, attempts to violate our usage policies, attempt to run things like covert social media, like covert influence operations, generating comments on social media and posting them. And our role as the investigators is to be part of that defensive system. We use quite mind-blowing AI tools to scale up the work we do. But our work is really to understand how are threat actors actually trying to use AI? How do we get ahead of them? How do we stop them? How do we disrupt them? How do we make it as hard as possible for them to operate and to actually reach people? Because it's always important to think, with a covert influence operation, it's about people. At one end, you have an operator. At the other hand, you have presumably somebody they are trying to influence. And all the technology in between is the medium. But when you start thinking about what is the operator on one end, what are they trying to do? They're trying to reach people at the other end, and the tech becomes the piece in between. So what have we seen on the covert influence operations front? We have seen some threat actors trying to use AI to get better at what they're doing, to avoid some of their mistakes. That can be as simple as avoiding some of the language errors they make. Often this applies to well-known operations that have been studied for a long time. For example, there's a Chinese operation known as Camouflage Dragon, which I was the first researcher to publicly name and expose back in 2019. Ever since 2019, it looks like manually creating social media comments in poor English, which get posted across multiple social media platforms, and then getting other fake accounts on social media to amplify those comments. Early last year, we discovered what looked like a branch of Spamouflage using AI to generate short comments without language errors and post them on social media. And really what we've been seeing, if you think about it in that way, has been evolution rather than revolution. Many of the threat actors who have begun to use AI were known from the pre-AI world, like Spamouflage, like the Russian operation known as Doppelganger, like some of the Iranian operations going on. But they've been using AI to try and get a little bit better or less bad at what they're doing. But the really important thing, which I don't think has really shown up in the discussion maybe as much as would have been helpful, we haven't seen these threat actors, these operations, get a substantial increase in virality or audience reach because they've shifted from manually created to AI-generated content. They're still using fake accounts on social media. Those social media accounts, as far as we can tell, are still not really being seen by normal people. And I think underpinning this discussion, we tend to forget how competitive social media are as an environment and how many real people are out there competing for attention. And it's a hard world for a fake account out there. There's a tool that I created back in 2020 called the breakout scale, which is a way to estimate the impact of a covert influence operation in real time, right, without huge data pools looking back in time. And it's based on the storm scale, so it reaches from category 1 to category 6. The category 1 operation will be on one social media platform and will stay in one community, won't break out to real people or to large audiences. Category 6 will actually break out off social media. It'll go through the mainstream media. It'll get amplified by influencers, and it may end up actually influencing political decision making. So if you think about that scale of 1 to 6, pretty well all the covert influence operations that we have disrupted, that we've observed, have been in category 2 or category 1. So they're at the low end of the scale. They're posting on multiple social media platforms, but they don't seem to be getting in front of real people with much greater efficacy in general than what we observed in the pre-AI age. And in fact, one of the most common uses, to your question, Theodore, about like what are they actually doing with AI, one of the uses that I've seen come up in a number of different operations will be faking engagement, where a covert influence operation will use AI to create a social media post or a short article that will be posted online. And then the operation will use AI to generate a whole load of comments on that article. And often when you see that happening, what you'll see if you look at, you find the article online, you look at the comments, all those comments were generated by AI. And so it looks like, at least in those circumstances, what the threat actors are doing is using AI to make it look like they're reaching people even when they're not. Now, there's a question why they're doing that, and it's not clear. You could argue that they're trying to make themselves look more convincing to an external audience. You could also argue that they're just trying to convince the guy who's paying the bills that they are actually doing a good job. It would be interesting to know more about what's really going on there. But you fake engagement when you need to, right? You fake engagement if you're not getting real engagement. And so the fact that so many operations have been doing this tends to point in the same way that actually creating content is only one part of the puzzle, and the puzzle that they actually have to crack is getting that in front of real audiences and sharing. And we haven't seen substantial evidence to suggest that that is happening. Another of the lessons that we've seen from the reporting that we've done is that exposing covert influence operations matters. Nobody has a monopoly on detection. If one team exposes an operation, publishes it, other teams can take a look as well. And there was a really good example of that last summer where Microsoft exposed what they assessed to be an Iranian covert influence operation that was running a number of websites posing as Western media outlets. This is a pattern we've seen coming from Iran several times historically. In this case, Microsoft assessed that the content at least some of the content on these websites may have been AI generated. Clearly that piqued our interest, so we went and took a look and discovered that some of the content on the websites had been generated by ChatGPT. So we investigated, we disrupted. But we also saw that website generation wasn't the only thing this operation had been doing. We'd also seen them generating short comments that ended up being posted on X, on Twitter, about American politics posing as partisan Americans. And then also there was comment generation about Scottish independence that was being posted on Instagram. So you have one operation which appears to be doing 3 different work streams and running them all through AI. We exposed what we saw, and subsequently Meta came along and said that they had investigated, they had done their own takedown, and they'd managed to connect the Instagram activity to a takedown that they'd done at the end of 2021. So because you have different teams exposing what they were seeing, as a community as a whole, as a defender community, we had a clearer understanding of how these different parts fit together that wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been this kind of exposure going on. The final point I'll make, because I think it's important to the discussion on the role of the state and the involvement of the state, that there's a bit of a tendency in some of the public debates that if an operation comes from a particular country, it must be linked to the government of that country. In fact, what we've seen is that there's a spectrum of actors involved in the covert influence operations world, and some do appear to be linked to the state. Some, it is alleged that they have some kind of state connection. Some appear to be commercial companies. And in some cases, there's a pattern that I've seen sort of long before my AI work, where you'd see an operation running 3 or 4 different, very diverse work streams at the same time. That's often an indication that it's a commercial company with multiple clients. And so as we talk about the state of the state of influence operations, the state of the geopolitics and the situation that they reflect, it's always important just to have that slight note of caution in mind and not to assume that every influence operation is actually linked to a state. Just to have the caution to say some are commercial, some have never been adequately attributed. That's the nature of being an investigator. And so when we think about the role of the state in these things, it's just useful to make sure that we're not, if you'll pardon the phrase, overstating what actor may be responsible for what activity without some really strong evidence. I think we're close to time now, so I will stop. But I hope that framing gives you a sense of where I think the Guardian report fits in. I think that there is concern out there about the role of AI. My job and the job of teams like mine, and Anthropic and Google are also now reporting on what they're seeing on AI. The role of teams like ours is to go and find that kind of stuff and make sure that it doesn't get too far.
Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting. I think that your work and this of your colleagues, despite your blogs, you publish occasionally blogs about your work and operations that you have discovered. But I think it's not well known, and it's really great to, I think, for people to hear this. And when we'll have also very soon the video on YouTube. While asking the auditors here, there are a lot of people, and we have covered a lot of different grounds, which are all related to the issue of the protection of state and sovereignty. I would kindly ask you if you have questions or brief comments to come here, because we need to capture your voice for the YouTube.
Training of the model.
Yeah, for the training of the model, exactly. And then we'll stand it to Ben to see if there is any influence operation in your comments. Yeah. But precisely, I would like to start just with two quick questions. I would have a lot for Ben, which is, first, we understand from what you say that malicious actors, whatever they are, they cannot really act just with ChatGPT. They need some other things. They need to go through Meta, through X, through social media, through other platforms. And I guess that the first thing that you do is that you communicate with the relevant people in these other companies to ask them, do you see any activity concerning this? We have the impression. How exactly do you do? And if you find, for instance, I don't know, because there is always this huge fear of election interference, and you see what happened also recently in the discussions concerning the elections in Romania, for instance. And do you also contact states beyond platforms? Would you contact the state and say, especially if there is an election and you have the feeling that there is an influence operation, would you contact the authorities to let them know that you have detected something and that you have some... So this is the first big question. And the second, as we're in a privacy conference, of course, the big question is, your work is absolutely fundamental and important in order to protect from abuse. At the same time, the big question is how exactly, what kind of guardrails you use in order to be able to deal with what is going on with ChatGPT, but while avoiding to give the impression that everything, all the inputs by users, for instance, all the activity by every user is under surveillance somehow. So how exactly do you create the balance between the necessity to act, to avoid, to detect and avoid these influence operations, and the need to protect privacy?
Sure. So on the second point first, I was rather delighted to find that actually on the OpenAI website we have a help center which explains this, so I can cheerfully give you chapter and verse. Privacy is really important. As an investigator, my job is to give our legal team the information they need to make sure that due process is followed. And I know that they spend a lot of time making sure that we do follow due process, and that particularly important in Europe. We know that. I was a journalist back in 2007. In the Berlaymont press room when the right to be forgotten was being discussed. So that's the first point, that I'm the investigator, but my legal colleagues spend a lot of time making sure that due process is followed. In terms of the work that I do, it is very carefully constrained. My job is looking for attempts to abuse the model and for potential violative activity. I have a whole bunch of AI-powered tools which will do detection and triage to surface the likeliest suspects. But access is limited. It is limited to a need-to-know basis. There are very strict technical controls in place to make sure that the access is limited, is kept to need to know, is kept for the purposes, and the purposes themselves are limited. For example, my job is investigating potential abuses. That is a very constrained set of activities that I will be looking for. And that's all written up on the OpenAI, I think it's called the Help Center. So there's a full Q&A there if anyone's interested in more information. In terms of information sharing, that there are many ways that can happen. I mean, you'll see, for example, we have published these threat reports, which they're semi-regular. In August last year, when the Iranian operation was exposed, we did a separate release on that, just on that one operation, because it seemed important to expose it in a timely kind of way. Something which has really grown over the years has been the growth of this kind of defender community, where there are many different teams in many different places looking for similar or overlapping or related kind of problems. And it's a very dynamic space. There are changes. There will keep on being changes. But sometimes you do see the effect of being able to share information in a timely manner. For example, towards the end of last year, we discovered what resembled a romance scam center in Cambodia that was using ChatGPT to do some translation work. We disrupted that. We were able, I worked with my legal team to be able to do information shares with that. Subsequently, Meta did a large disruption of a Cambodian scam network and said that one of the contributing factors to their disruption was information that we had shared with them. And then they shared some information back with us, and that enabled us to find another Cambodian scam center. So there is a community out there. It's always going to be a work in progress. There will always be more to do. But to the point I made at the start, and the meta statement is published. The OpenAI reports are public knowledge. You can go and check the sources there. But ultimately, as I said, exposure is part of the way that you make it harder for these covert influence operations to operate. Ultimately, if they rely on being covert to make them overt, then it's going to be harder for them to do their jobs.
Thanks a lot. And we have 5 minutes. So please, if you have the kindness to come here to the micro. If you have a mobility problem, I will repeat. But if you don't have a mobility problem, please come here to the micro to ask, and keep it brief if it is possible, so we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
Please present yourself.
Do you hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Maciej Otmanowski. I'm PhD researcher at LSTS, so I'm from the university here in Brussels. I'm very grateful for this panel, and I enjoyed it a lot because I disagree with many things. So I enjoy it. I have multiple questions, but maybe I narrow down to one. And actually, the thing I disagree with, why you want to regulate opportunities? Like, I think the thing we should actually regulate, those are risks. And if we regulate opportunities, then we actually limit our possibilities. Like, opportunities is the matter of investment. So investors search for opportunities. Okay, and why you want to limit this scope? Actually, so that's the point, like this one point I want to raise now. Thank you.
I will, let's take all the questions, please, because we don't have a lot of time, and as the people are waiting, please keep it brief if it is possible.
Hello, my name is David Dapp, Microsoft. My question is more from a citizen, European citizen, to you, Kai. And you mentioned decentralized industrial setup, and how to leverage that. At the same time, industry structure is not just a design thing. It emerged from dynamics, the behavior of people, consolidation, economic performance. And more consolidated industry structure also bring benefits in terms of cost of coordination, speed of coordination, a market for exits. You mentioned venture capital. If you have people that can acquire startup, all of that participate and give certain benefits. And my question is, how much of that is taken into account in the thinking, the Eurostack, other things, in thinking about the pros and the cons and the benefits of different industrial setups, right? Because one last point, many of the innovation we see today and the speed of innovation happens because there is strong integration and coordination across different layers of the stack. You have models, and then that requires changes for a GPU level, a design in data center, and therefore the speed and the effectiveness of coordination to actually innovate is a very important element. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, Javier Lopez. I'm a researcher at the Metaverse Chair in University of Alicante in Spain. My question is for the whole panel. Congratulations, it's been a fantastic session. It's for the whole panel, but actually a reaction and a comment on Kai's side on the how the Europeans, we need to choose our battles, right? Not to aim to build a European ChatGPT, and European Meta, and European Facebook, and so on in every field where we have dependency. And my question will be where do we actually have opportunities from different views, not only yours, but also the other people. And also because I was recently attending another panel on a presentation on a book by Mariji Sake, a former politician, liberal from Dutch, from the Netherlands, who was advocating actually for the contrary. That one of the problems that we have as Europeans is we see that maybe the effort is not going to be worth investing, and that's already a barrier for the initiative, and that's why we don't make it in so many industries, right? Maybe the Dutch perspective or the liberals are more keen into all this, but that was all. Thank you.
Keep this very brief. Declan McDowell-Naylor from the Information Commission's Office. Ben, very fascinating work. How do you expect OpenAI's plans to release an open source model to change the nature of your work? And to Kai, what is the perception of the UK's opportunities plan and its geopolitical role within Brussels in general? Might be something to discuss afterwards rather than. Thank you.
Thanks to all for these very, very interesting questions and comments. Who wishes to start? Let's keep it brief.
Maybe Ben, because he's far.
Yes, Ben, would you like to address this question about would open source would change something to this kind of work about influence operations and other abuses?
I think the emergence of open source will be it'll be an evolution in the space. We'll see what it brings, but the essence of investigating influence operations is you're always looking at multiple sources, you're always looking at multiple indicators, and sometimes what may appear at the start to be an advantage for the operation turns out to be an advantage for the investigator in the end. I remember particularly when the first wave of AI-generated profile pictures came out back in December, sort of in 2019. I was lucky enough to lead the investigative team that investigated the first large-scale covert influence operation using these profile pictures. And initially we were thinking, wow, this is a real game changer for the influence operations because you can't just reverse search the image and find out where it was stolen from. And so it seemed to be an advantage for them. But then very rapidly we realized that these GAN-generated profile pictures were very recognizable in themselves. They really stood out from the crowd as being particularly distinctive. And within a very short time period, the defender community had developed ways to spot those profile pictures. And so what should have been and what appeared to be for the threat actors a good way to stay hidden ended up being a way to get caught, and tends to be the evolution you see in this space. So I would expect to see more of that kind of dynamic. That it may bring changes, and then the community will work out, well, how do those changes actually become an advantage for the defender? For example, does it mean that we get more defender use of AI? AI-powered tools in this space are very, very powerful. If you have more defenders using that tooling, you might well get more powerful defenses.
Thanks so much. Kai, just try to keep it brief, because people start leaving, and I want them to give you a good applause for this very interesting panel.
And as you saw, brief is difficult for me, so I really am now under a lot of pressure, but I will give it a try. So to the first question, for us, so as I said, the movement is really broad. Marietje became actually a good friend of mine. Marietje Schaake has, of course, some different ideas, but we all share the common goal. And this is, I think, what makes us strong. Let's say our camp, and this is going from Sebastiano, from Christina, from me, from Axel, and so on and so on. For us, it's really, really important that we don't really lead. We made an initiative, but it should be really industry-driven. We don't want what you call in Germany Planwirtschaft, so something from China and so on, where basically the state is telling industry what to do. Every time we tried it, in our eyes, it failed. So we are really hoping that, there is maybe another Airbus example, or Amadeus when it comes to booking systems with planes. There are federated systems, maybe in the cloud area. We all are traumatized from Gaia X, but maybe we can learn from some mistakes and give it another try, at least in some areas. What makes me especially very positive and optimistic is that especially in Germany, as you probably know, we had always this problem that every company was basically working on its own, was not really cooperating. And if I now look what is happening in Heilbronn, in Neckarsulm with the Schwarz company, but also Unternehmertum, Munich, and they are actually US big tech working very good together with German companies, Siemens, and also startups. And they are really more and more striving ecosystems, for example, on AI and so on. And I think this is really the way to go. And companies know best. They know where there is a business model, where there could be a commercial interest. And what we just want to provide is a unifying vision, let's say, but everything else the industry is much better capable to do. Now the question on where Europe can lead. You find a lot in our paper, European View, so there a little bit more. I just copy-pasted one sentence. The new strategy, it's under digital industry strategy, chapter 4.1. The new strategy should prioritize areas where European players can plausibly achieve global leadership, global quantum computing, applied AI, biotechnology, resilient data infrastructure, digitally integrated defense systems. And just to give you a little bit more concrete example, what I really like from Falcon in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, but also Mistral is going now a very similar way, is to build up a foundation model that is actually acknowledging how diverse Europe is, for example, in terms of languages. So to come up, I was talking about niche economy or more specific economy, to come up with more narrow large language models that are, for example, fitting really good to Slovakia, which otherwise has a problem because 60% plus of the internet is English content, maybe not very well represented. So there, I think, for example, when we are talking about foundation model, Mistral is doing something very, very smart, and even outside Europe, as we've seen with Falcon. And maybe just very shortly to UK AI strategy, and this is a little bit in criticism of the UK government. I actually lost a little bit the overview where they are right now, because they change so often the AI strategy. Sometimes they wanted to regulate also foundation models, then they didn't want to regulate, then high levels, then similar to AI Act and so on. In general, what I heard now in the last weeks, I think UK and also Switzerland and so on, they are doing very wisely if they are going for an AI Act light approach. So checking a little bit what is happening in Europe, maybe regulating there where it's really necessary, but on all other areas really focusing more on opportunities, and therefore maybe having a soft entrance for non-European companies in the European markets, that they will first go to the UK, to Switzerland, and then maybe make the jump to the full continent. If I would be Prime Minister, I would definitely do that, because I think this will create a lot of opportunities in commercial terms.
Oh, very quickly. So I think you did not, maybe I was not clear enough. I think if we agree that AI raises challenges, new challenges, novel, etc., and they need rules, if we agree on that, then say how do we frame these rules? And this is where, whether your target, your main political objective is to foster innovation, maximize the opportunity, and support this new emergent technology, it's one thing, or whether you see it more as a threat, as a risk, and you insist on safeguards. And do the exercise with your students. Do 2 workshops with the same students. First topic, maximize innovation, foster benefits. Second, insist on safeguards. You will not land at the same place. That's what I wanted to say. And to illustrate that, just have a look at how the executive order of Biden that has been removed now was designed. It was designed with 2 major objectives. One was industrial, particularly in biotech and doing some joint funding between private and public companies. And the other was national security, targeting China. And part of the provisions of the executive order was grounded on the Defense Production Act. Defense Production Act. So you see, you have many approaches, that is just what I wanted to say, and they are not neutral in the end result, quite the contrary. This is only my point. And I say, and the rapport Draghi, I've displayed the extract, considers, and I agree with you, that in Europe we have a very risk-averse approach in general, and this is problematic here.
So huge thanks for that. I really enjoyed the conversation. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben, for also, and a huge applause to all the panelists. Thank you very much. Thanks to all for attending.